Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons, and this is the EarthWorks podcast. And today we're in our brand new studios. I'm here along with Jack Higgins, our agronomist from the East Coast, and our dear friend and our chemist, Mr. Lawrence Mayhew, who many of you have listened to in the past podcasts. And we wanted to bring him back to start the new year and talk a little bit about some of the work that he's been doing with us on eco-adaptive technology. And to start this off, we are going to be making some changes, some good changes, some important changes to our liquid formulas, the Foliars Plus line. Lawrence and our team have worked pretty hard for the last 2 years, finding ways to make a more effective formula, always trying to make better changes. And we feel very strongly that we've nailed this with a couple of formulas. Our first formula with Eco-Adaptive technology was K-Vantage, but we have recently reformulated Protein Plus and CalVantage and Kick. And I think, Lawrence, we're going to be doing the rest of them as we get through the season. But talk to us a little bit about, at least introduce to us. And I know we've talked about this before, but since we're really now into the full stream of this, let's talk about what the heck is eco-adaptive technology, for goodness sake.
Eco-adaptive techniques, technology, methods, formulations are intended. Chemistry, biochemistry,
geochemistry,
bio-geochemistry.
Bio-geo.
We're not confused. We're not confused.
Is intended to mimic nature, to really put it simply. The idea all started when I was attending a regulatory meeting, APCO meeting, and everybody's talking about soluble this, solubility. And I raised a simple question at that meeting. Well, how much soluble phosphorus? Let's take phosphorus, for example. How much soluble phosphorus is there in a natural balance? In other words, it hasn't been fertilized lately. What is in a natural system? What are in natural soil solution? Soil solution is the water that's in between all the colloidal, all the pores and everything. So it's the water that's being held by soils. Well, how much is in solution then if everything is about solubility? The answer, I couldn't find the answer that day. I had to dig through the literature for a long time, and digging later, the answer is 0.0004 pounds.
Which is basically zero, correct?
Nothing.
I mean, we're talking zero or very little anyway.
So in nature, there's no such thing as a phosphate in soil solution, but yet that's our approach. So what if we took a more ecologically minded approach? What if we said, let's adapt to this system rather than forcing that system to do it our way? Let's adapt to that system. So how much phosphate should we put on? Well, nature says you don't have to put on any. We'll take care of phosphorus. It's all bound to carbon.
Right.
Yeah, in acetals, for example, that's what you find when you go looking for phosphates in nature. So we pour on a whole lot of phosphate, for example, and within hours, days, within weeks, it's all gone as far as plant availability is concerned. It's tied up because we just disrupted that natural system with way too much phosphate. And the system says, oh my goodness, what is this? And it's called chemical equilibrium that takes care of the problem. It's a natural process. We call it tied up. So how do you release it? How do you get it back? Biology.
Right. So yeah, when you said that it's unavailable, what you really meant is that it's not soluble anymore. It's not
Correct.
soluble anymore. But that doesn't mean that it's plant unavailable. It's just that it's now we can get into biological processes.
So if we use the word available and if we use the term plant available, we're not using the right terminology, are we?
Right.
Now it becomes bioavailability. Is that available to the biology in that system? It doesn't matter if it's microbes or plant roots. Is it bioavailable? That's the big question, rather than available or soluble. I went to an APCO meeting where they were arguing 10 years ago whether silicon or the silicic acid method of the analytical method, where, well, does that produce available silicon or is that soluble silicon? 10 years later, they're still arguing the same point.
So that's the first hurdle that we have to get to in defining what is eco-adaptive technology, is that it's not the straight solubility model that has that regulators have been using. We're not talking about solubility necessarily. We're talking about bioavailability.
And how do you achieve bioavailability? Plants and microbes have evolved together to the point where they recognize certain balances as being bioavailable rather than concentration, because you could have very, very low concentration, for example, in the oceans.
Mm-hmm.
And the plankton will adapt to low concentrations of nitrogen at deeper depths, but they need a balance of nitrogen and phosphorus and carbon in order to access or realize that what is floating around them is now bioavailable. Doesn't matter if it's in low concentration, they'll figure that out. But if it's out of balance, if there's a lot of nitrogen like there is at the surface, they grow a lot differently there than they do at depths where there's low nitrogen.
And you can have the same conversation about high concentrations, because a lot of the soils that we look at have incredibly high levels of phosphorus.
Yes.
But the availability of that phosphorus is not always there, or it's usually not there, correct?
That's correct. I come from agriculture, and all these soils around us in Wisconsin, where I am, have had potash applied to them because the co-op said, oh, your alfalfa is not taking up potassium, so you need to pour more on. And they do. They just keep pouring it on. They pour it on. They pour it on. Now, the typical soil in Wisconsin that's had all these potash applied to it all these years has approximately 30,000 pounds of potassium, but it's not bioavailable.
Right.
So that obviously by pouring more on, it did not solve the problem.
And that's where the name, the moron theory, came on, correct?
Moron.
Yes,
moron.
yes. Pour more on.
Or moron.
You need more nitrogen? Pour more on.
I'm going to throw out another term that you really already defined, but I'm just going to throw the term out to further confuse the listener. Ecological stoichiometry.
Okay.
And really, you were discussing balances, proportions, ratios of one nutrient to another, and in nutrients and many different ratios of nutrients to the other. It doesn't matter the total concentration, it matters the concentration in relationship to another element. Is that really defining ecological stoichiometry, and how does that kind of apply to what we're talking about in terms of bioavailability?
Yes, I agree. Getting back to my model of a natural soil system, if we could find a soil that was undisturbed, and then we pull a soil sample, we squeeze the water out of it that has all kinds of nutrients in it, we're going to be able to see a consistent balance among all of those. And that you could call that ecological stoichiometry. Stoichiometry is a term that if you took chemistry in high school, you should be familiar with it, but I realize a lot of people don't like chemistry, don't understand chemistry.
Or
but
it was a long time ago.
Yes, right. And we forgot it all as well.
Or you totally forgot, or you should have been paying attention right about then.
I'll never need that in my career.
Stoichiometry it sounds complicated, but what it says is, I'll just use water, for example, H2O. If you have 2 atoms of water for every 1 atom of oxygen, you analyze that material, you very likely have water. Okay, if you have 3 atoms of hydrogen, now you have deuterium. It's not water. Okay, so that's called stoichiometry, and there's no such thing as H1O, so that's out. That stoichiometry says, or chemistry says, that stoichiometry does not exist. The typical stoichiometry of water is 2 atoms of hydrogen for every atom. Whoa, 2 atoms.
Try that again.
2 atoms.
See, it's not easy, is it?
No.
You had it right.
2 atoms, H2O. Okay, that's enough said about that. The point is, if you looked at a natural solution, you would see natural balances that exist there. And the number one thing that's in concentration, approximately 1 molar, not weight, but 1 molar concentration, 1 millimolar concentration is calcium. That's what you find in soils. That's the predominant cation in soil solution, and everything else is less than that. But there's a balance. There's a ratio of calcium to everything else that's in that soil solution. And there's a lot more there than N, P, and K, boron, copper, and zinc, and manganese. There's a lot
And really,
more
the secret behind what you're doing with eco-adaptive technology is really balancing out, in formulation at least, balancing out the ratios between, and in our case, we've got in some products 30, 40 raw materials. We're trying to balance out all of that material so that not one element is over dominating another and basically forcing it to be unavailable. Is that a fair assessment as to the simplicity of what we're talking about here in eco-adaptive technology?
Yes, if you were to graph out the molar concentrations of what is in a product, for example, and you want to call it let's say a calcium product, and your bar graph goes way up because your calcium guarantee is way up, you do not have a calcium product at that point.
Yeah.
Because that calcium needs to be utilized. That calcium needs boron. That calcium needs strontium. That calcium needs a balance of ammonium. You don't want ammonium overwhelm the calcium and vice versa. So you need a lot more than just calcium in a calcium product. You need other things to balance that calcium so that when it goes into the soil system, the system recognizes it as something that they're accustomed to. In other words, they're not overwhelmed by calcium or sulfate. The typical thing in agricultural systems is to put calcium sulfate on. That's way too much sulfate balanced against calcium. It's not truly a source of calcium at that point. In your industry, it's calcium nitrate, which is not a legitimate calcium input because there's very little calcium there from a molecular standpoint compared to nitrate. The nitrate is overwhelming the calcium. So a straight calcium nitrate product is the stoichiometry of that in an environmental aspect or an environmental context is out of balance.
And you started this by saying what I think is really the definition of this concept of eco-adaptive technology. You're mimicking how nature would present these elements to the plant. So, like you were saying, many products in our marketplace, calcium products, for an example, are calcium nitrate, and they're calling that a calcium product. Oh, you got a great calcium product, but you really don't, and we kind of proved that. With some of the work that we've done. And then you went back and kind of rewrote some of the formulas. Even though we might have less calcium in it, we actually have better calcium mobility or uptake potential because they're balanced with other nutrients like sulfur or nitrates. I mean, help me understand that better if I'm wrong with that.
Well, your marching orders to me were, let's pick on a calcium product. Yeah, we want calcium out there, but we also want green up, and that's why we got to have nitrogen. And that's why the industry primarily uses calcium nitrate. They're seeing more green up than they are calcium utilization. They may or may not realize that. So a calcium product that's straight calcium nitrate is not a calcium product because the nitrate's overwhelming the bioavailability of the calcium that's in that product. So yeah, you'll see green up, you'll see a response to the nitrate, but it won't last long, and it will bring on disease pressure because now the plant is living in a system that's out of balance, and that balance says, or that plant says, boy, I have to make up for this somehow. I have to expand energy to get rid of some of that nitrate I'm taking in. It's called futile nutrients. They actually bring them in, they spit them back out because there's way too much of it. They will attempt to rebalance that system so that they can survive and be healthy.
Yeah, I think that you just brought up one of the key benefits to an eco-adaptive technology formulation is that you increase the plant health safety because, like you said, if you're flooding the plant cell with something that it doesn't need, it leaves it very susceptible to biotic stress to disease, but also in our industry, abiotic stress. We've got a lot of traffic on these plants, you know, a
Yes.
lot. So we're doing a lot of destruction. If the structural integrity of the plant is compromised, just walking on it, rolling on it, mowing it will really destroy it.
Well, water use efficiency is really an indicator of how well the plants are taking up water, for example, or whether that water is just flowing through the system and getting away from the plants. So then everybody would the knee-jerk reaction would be, well, we got to make sure we address potassium in that case. And you want a turgid, you want you want stiffness so the ball rolls, right? This is all potassium phenomena. Well, interestingly, potassium chloride inhibits the uptake of potassium. The scientific literature is loaded with information about if you put on potassium chloride, you get less potassium uptake. You put on more potassium chloride, you get less, again, lesser, and it keeps going in the opposite direction.
So you're saying the boron theory doesn't work here with potassium chloride? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's a great example of how it does not work. Yeah.
Right.
I love picking on potassium because potassium is one of the hardest things in a soil system to make bioavailable. Very difficult.
Let's talk about that. I mean, the first thing that we did together on this technology was K-Vantage, which is a product that we're truly going to be introducing this year at the GIS. But it's been in the market for a couple of years, and some of the things that we discovered when some of our clients were using it was water holding capacity. I mean, it really, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my assumption is that one of the things that we're hoping to be able to do is protect the plant from sucking up a lot of sodium by bringing in available forms of potassium, and we have 3 separate available forms in a eco-adaptive formulation so that the potassium actually does come in, but that in its own right would help protect the plant from just bringing in lots of excess sodium, which then would demand the plant would have to bring in a lot of water and pull it out of the soil. So water retention in that soil would become problematic. And what we're seeing is guys are saying, you know, they don't need to pull hoses as much when they're using this product. And is that all fair to lay on the backbone of eco-adaptive technology with K-Vantage?
Well, I believe so, because if you added a potassium product, I don't care if it's potassium chloride, potassium sulfate, any potassium product, and if you don't see better water use efficiency, then you are dealing with an ineffective input of potassium. So whereas we looked at and said, well, what form of potassium will the plant take in? Now, when you're working with turf, you're working with foliar as well as soil, because there's no way you're going to keep it off those blades of grass. So you want something that'll do both things. It'll be taken up foliar as long as that lasts, and then when it gets washed into the soil system, it has to be bioavailable once it's there. So we started looking at potassium acetates and formates instead, and even bicarbonates, because they're taken up more readily than sulfates, and it beats the heck out of chlorides.
You brought up a really interesting point, and I think that really fits to what we're talking about, eco-adaptive and mimicking nature. You're considering the fact that these formulations could go directly to a plant without a soil interface, so that you've mimicked nature within the jug, and those balances, those proportions within the jug, to know that it could directly go to the plant without having to hit the soil biome in order to rebalance. You know, you took that into consideration, it sounds like.
Yes, and the other thing those 3 ingredients have in common is that they're all tied to carbon.
Okay, right.
That's the difference. They are not salts, they are carbon bound materials.
And these are carbon-based products, so we're actually introducing that as part of the equation and creating this improved uptake potential from these products. So when you bring that much carbon to the table, you're bringing in, you know, the carrier, but you're also bringing in a stimulus for the microbiology in the soil that helps further move the element.
Yeah, a lot of energy. And also, like you said, not salts, greatly reducing the salt index of the product, so that it's not a salty product that is going to strip and pull moisture and pull H2O out of the plant.
Yeah, it's is if you ate too much sodium chloride, for example.
Like I do
What
every
do you need to what do you need to
That bag of
rebalance?
chips that I eat, yeah.
every
There you
night.
go.
Feel a little
So-
bloated at the end of it all. I'm like puffy.
Yes.
And how do you rebalance?
A lot of water.
A lot of water.
Yeah.
There's no difference. So we are a biological system. We are not unique. Grass is not a unique biological system. We are all very much the same. You do a slice through a mitochondria for a plant, it looks identical to a
Right.
mitochondria that came out of your liver. They're all the same. There's
Let me throw this little thought in there, because it's one thing that Jerry Brunetti used to always talk about, but he always talked about funny amino acids.
yes.
And this process of being able to bring in more nutrients at more efficient rates means that the plant can start to build amino acids completely, and then move its way on to building, peptides and proteins and on all the other goodies. Is that a fair assessment based on what we were trying to accomplish with eco-adaptive technology?
Yeah, the opposite of that would be I got a drug for that. So
Right.
yeah, this technology is just saying, what does nature do? Okay, everything's linked to carbon, almost everything, I think, except there's one exception to that. I can't remember. Oh, it's potassium. Yeah, potassium is generally not bioavailable because you don't link it to carbon. So if we link it to carbon, just like in a soil system, then we're mimicking nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned like and this is kind of another benefit to this. If you don't overload a system with salt, you don't need as much water to balance that salt. And really the benefit that I'm talking about is we're trying to be efficient and reduce all inputs. We're trying to reduce all inputs into the golf course, into the turf system, especially water, which is a finite resource that we shouldn't abuse.
Sure is.
So yeah, like if we can reduce the wilting point of the plant, if we can say, okay, at 10% soil moisture, we don't see any wilt signs in this plant, that's a great thing, as opposed to 18% soil moisture in a salt-ridden plant that is lighting up very wilted. That's a very objective way to kind of look at this.
And those are the kind of things that we're actually starting to see now. Certainly with K-Vantage, we've really studied this pretty hard, and we're seeing, at least on a level where the superintendents can see it, they're reducing their water input, which is significant. And I still will contend that has a lot to do with the sodium buffering capacity of that particular product, which is really what it was built to do, was help us buffer sodium out of these, especially the lower CEC soils. I mean, these kind of products are effective in low CEC, moderate CECs, or even heavy soils, correct? I mean, the biology is the same.
Yeah, the CEC is built into the product.
Right.
That's right. That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
The holding capacity is built into the product.
Yes.
And that's where I think what we've tried to do, and this goes back to Jerry's original formulations, was really make them very carbon heavy and mineral heavy. And, and as we've tested, all of these liquids have over 70 trace minerals. They have over 25 amino acid complexes in them. So they're very dense and rich products that we've just simply tweaked enough to make the the availability of the important minerals, and I would assume all the trace elements as well, more available. Is that a fair statement? Is that a fair
statement? I'm glad you brought up trace elements. It's too bad they're called that.
I know.
They are so critical to the efficiency of the plant to process things that we provided in the soil. And they're so critical to all enzymatic activities in all living things that if you have a deficiency in one of them, you don't necessarily solve the problem by by jacking it up and by putting more of that on,
Mhm.
let's say you detect a zinc deficiency, we take a little different approach. We'll ask how much zinc is in the soil. What do we need to balance zinc? Well, we need some iron to balance zinc, not a lot of iron, and we need some manganese to help that zinc uptake.
Yeah.
So then we look at the balance of these things rather than absolute numbers. And again, in natural systems, you can calculate it. It's in the scientific literature. You can see what these balances are and then mimic that instead of just saying, oh, there's a deficiency. You know that thing they always put up there at every meeting. Ever been to the Von Liebig barrel with the slat missing in the front? That
Yes.
is so outrageous. That is as reductionist as you can possibly get. That is totally ignoring the balance in these systems and saying, oh, well, you bring this up. And I actually saw a barrel on one website where they had pesticides in that short short
Oh my
slot.
gosh.
Wow.
So
Bring the pesticides up.
yeah, you can put anything you want there on there, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
The
No, and
problem-
that goes back to the old theory that there's only, what is it, 7 minerals that plants even take up.
It was
which-
16.
Yeah.
All right, whatever. I'm
Yeah.
trying.
You can analyze the roots, you can analyze the shoots, you can analyze the leaves of plants, and
Mhm.
you will find 7 now, unless they're not there in the soil to begin with, but in a balanced natural system, there are 75 elements in plants.
Right. Kelp, looking at kelp is a great example of that, where they are
Mhm.
available in the
Yeah,
ocean.
there's
They
over-
are there.
yeah,
And
over
what do you
70,
pick up?
yeah.
Over 70.
Yeah.
That's why we use seawater in these products. We
And
bring
kelp
a
meal
multitude,
and
the
fish
kelp
meal and
and
you
the
know,
fish.
and the humic
Yeah.
pulls it all together and keeps it all in a package. And, it does, that's what this is all about. That's why you're starting to see the industry moving toward more carbon-based fertility, because they're starting to see that it's actually working. And when you do bring ample amounts of carbon to the soil.
You know, what blows me away is that people actually claim the humates are taken up by plants. They actually claim that they're a carbon source.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, I'll say they do one thing:
What's
And
that?
what is that?
structure.
Yeah.
Structure.
Soil structure. Yeah.
Well, not necessarily but they are.
But they could be
structure.
structure in the jug,
And
in the jug as well.
Yeah, they
Structure.
provide the conditions for all these interactions to take place because they are
Mhm.
naturally occurring in natural soils. Natural soils have a buildup of humic substances in them, and they're very recalcitrant. In other words, they're going to be there for thousands of years if we leave them alone. So obviously, they're not being used in nature for the purpose of being.
And if we haven't said this enough, Lawrence Mayhew is one of the world's renowned experts on humic substances, and he constantly is teaching us stuff. I mean, we talk every week, and it's like, oh, I didn't know that, and it's just kind of pissing me
It's
off.
structure.
But it's structure. It's that simple.
It's infrastructure. Think about this message. that we're-
Infrastructure.
Yeah,
It's providing the highways. It's providing the pipelines.
Or this
Yeah.
conversation that we're having right now. You're in Wisconsin. Joel and I are here in New Jersey. We're
Yeah.
recording this and we're going to put it out over the airwaves for everyone around the world. And
You just described humic substances.
That's right. It's a structure.
that's right. Oh, it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And and that's another thing that we're constantly tweaking is the humic complex that we're using, because you're constantly finding better and better things. So I mean, a lot of people ask us, why are you changing these things? We're always going to change things because we can always find better ways to do it. But one of the most striking things that you've taught me, certainly since the passing of Jerry Brunetti, is that there are good sources of humic substances out there. You and I had a wonderful conversation the other day with a gentleman that hopefully we can do some more work with, but always finding new pathways to a better humic complex. And when I say complex, we're using 2, 3, 4 different humic substances in any one of these products because we want to build the strongest infrastructure that we can within the jug. And that also brings us quality control, which is important to us, obviously.
Mhm. Yeah, change is good.
Change is good.
I think some people have had bad experiences where something they relied on was changed, but it wasn't for the good. We do the research first. We look at a product and say, how can we improve on that product? We don't say, oh, how can we cheapen that product down? No,
Right,
we
right.
never take that approach.
Yeah, in fact, it seems to be going the wrong way, and I meant to talk to you about that from a fiscal standpoint. But we're producing, I mean, I think our adage from day one, and I certainly learned this from Jerry, is that we're going to produce the very best products that we can to help people. And the reality, and Jack broached this earlier, is the reality is by getting these products better, we can actually use less. And so the economics of it becomes very, very poignant, because you can use less and have a much better product at the end of the day. And quite honestly, these liquids are so complete that there really doesn't need to be anything else in the tank other than some of these liquids to cross the spectrum of what the plant and soil needs.
That brings up a problem with the industry, ag and turf. I'll say to Joel, okay, Joel, I've got it. I've nailed the formulation, but you only have 4% nitrogen instead of 6%. You freak. Because your customers are telling you they need more on that label, when that's not reality, and that's a hard sell.
And that is a hard sell. It's funny, we were talking about that yesterday or Monday on our weekly meeting. Kevin Hicks brought it up at our meeting and talking about, how do we help people discover that you don't need to have 18%, or you don't need to, it doesn't have to be this very specific formula, because the analysis on most of these products is almost irrelevant anyway, because they're not available. And what we've really done is we've moved into this realm of making all of these elements available. So even though we may have lower analysis, yes, and it does sound like a sales pitch, and I'm sure we'll get criticism, but when we improve the availability through eco-adaptive technology, and that's what we've done, and I think we've proven that, we're getting better availability. So these silly, 16 different analyses, you don't need them. You need the materials and you need the minerals that we want to get into that plant, but we need to be able to get them into that plant.
I will say that growers will use what they have to. They do. Growers have an inherent want to be efficient, an inherent need to be efficient. And when they start to see the great response out of these products, they do take the leap of faith to use less water, less pesticide, less fertilizer, less fuel and labor and fuel. There's external restrictions on a lot of that too, more and more. So we're in the right vein, and the whole community is in the right vein. I feel like we're getting there.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We reformulated Protein Plus and pulled out the phosphorus, but we're pretty confident that even in that formula, the phosphorus that is there in the soil, and there's plenty of it in most soils, is going to be taken up and it's going to be brought into the plant so the plant can build, its proteins as it needs. Is that a fair assessment based on what we've been able to do with that particular product?
Yes, that was the first example of rebalancing a formulation because you had the need to provide a no phosphorus product.
That's right. I had a specific customer that needed a no phos product, requested a no phos protein.
They wanted Protein Plus without phosphorus.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And there was one other part to that. The other part was we want green up. You got to have green up.
It's a nitrogen product, of course.
It's a nitrogen product, yeah. But we want the green to last. Those were the marching.
It was a 3-week spray cycle. So yes, we needed that green to last.
And what we saw when we put this out, and we put it out at a pretty high profile park system, and they actually got they came back and said, look, man, this color is just running. It's really lasting a lot longer. And, and it's a more balanced formula, even without the phosphorus. But obviously we wouldn't have that if we weren't allowing the plant to bring phosphorus in. So that's clearly happening based on the results that we've seen. And we've seen, tissue tests where we've had phosphorus within the plant. So, I mean, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting that you brought up the Protein Plus reformulation, because that was the first time I took free license with you.
Yes, I remember that.
To actually
see the gray hair.
To actually rebalance the entire formula based on these eco-adaptive techniques. can you share my screen right now?
You can share your screen right now.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, but nobody listening will be able to see that. So,
Catch us on catch us on YouTube.
Yeah.
We also put it on YouTube. It's worth.
well, just talk your way through it because most of this is audio, Lawrence.
Okay, can you see that? Can you
Yes.
see-
Perfect.
Okay. Is that green thing showing up right there? Okay, on the left, right here, is the old protein plus formulation.
Right.
And what it says is that there's an imbalance. The biggest imbalance, believe it or not, was aluminum to calcium, something you
Wow.
probably wouldn't even think about.
Consider,
No.
right.
So I had to look at every ingredient and ask the simple question, where does the aluminum come from? Or we don't want to get rid of the aluminum. We want to rebalance against aluminum. A little different approach than most people would take. The potassium to calcium says that this is a high potassium product. That's not what I understood the product was supposed to be, because said you wanted green up, you wanted nitrogen. So that's what this graph is telling me right here. That's
So let me just qualify that, Lawrence. What we're looking at for those of you that aren't watching.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's a graph of the old formula and a graph of the new formula, and we have what we call the nature's line, and we want everything to be close to that line. The one on the old formula, everything is spiked out very high. The new formula, everything is very close to that baseline, which we're calling nature's line, because we're trying to get the natural system.
This is really stoichiometry that we're talking about.
This is. I'm looking at
Jack's
the
very
molar.
excited right now. He just loves stoichiometry.
It's ratios. I mean, as soon as I came into this job 15 years ago with you, the first thing you taught me about was base saturation ratios. And it's about ratios, and it makes perfect sense.
You're always hearing these salesmen saying we have a balanced fertilizer. I don't think they understand
10-10-10. It's balanced, man. Come on, that's balance.
So here's out of balance for you. Here's a product that's worked for years, so I can't screw it up, right? I mean,
that's an interesting point, because that was our formula and it worked. Now I think a lot of the reason why it worked is because it's so carbon heavy, because the formula is so complex. But even within our own family, we were able to look at this and make it even better. And now with a more balanced stoichiometry, now with a more balanced ratios and all that heavy carbon in these things, they're showing their true colors and working even better, lasting longer, helping us with water management. But when we started looking at this, I mean, even looking at, we're talking about our, we're kind of showing our secrets here, but it was really quite striking that we could improve what we thought were some of the best formulas going as much as we have, and that just blows my mind.
What I'm looking at here too is a boron to calcium imbalance.
Yeah.
There was, in fact, way too much boron in that product, in my opinion.
Right.
It says that it's about 2.3 times greater than it should have been. So then you go over here, and I didn't really get rid of the problem of, let's say, sulfates and borons. I didn't get rid of the problem because I said
them better.
Yeah, I balanced them better. I said, hey, this product has a certain character, and I don't want to destroy that character. I want to see these over here bigger than those over there. So that's all I did. This part of the graph is greater than that part of the graph. So I didn't destroy the character of the product, because the balances have just been toned down a bit. But on the micronutrient side, you said you wanted green up. On the micronutrient side, we had far too much manganese in there. There was manganese to copper ratio, which means that'll bring on disease. The
iron, far too little iron, it looks like then.
Well, too much manganese relative to copper.
Right.
Okay, I either reduce the manganese or increase the copper. Then you're working, now you're being a formulator and you figure out how to do that. Okay, then the iron to manganese ratio was off. It says that there's too much manganese relative to iron. Starting to point a finger at manganese is what it's saying.
Yeah, it seems like it. That's right.
The manganese to zinc ratio is too high. Okay, let's just tone it down right to this level here. Like Joel said, this little zero line right across here would be a completely balanced formulation.
Nature's
Which
line,
we're not going to do. That's not the goal. The goal is not to
Right.
balance everything, because you want a calcium product. You want this expression of calcium here, like potassium was holding back the expression. I'm sorry, potassium was holding back the expression of calcium in the old formula. So just back the potassium off a little bit, raise the calcium a wee bit, get that better in line. But on the micronutrients, I totally rebalance those to natural, to mimic nature. They're almost zero from nature. You know, they're. This graph says, how different are you from nature? Well, not very different at all. And what was the report, Jack, after they applied that product?
Yeah, the report was that that we can't believe the vibrant green color,
Cool.
the vibrant green color that lasts that entire 3-week spray cycle at relatively low nitrogen.
Yeah, very low rates. And think about that. This is coming from folks that, stare at that property every day of their lives. I mean, this is, they know that property inside and out. And for them to come back to us that excited was, we kind of knew we were on the right track when we started getting that kind of feedback.
And I like how you define that the goal is not to be exactly at zero in all of these products. It's not to be zero derivation from nature. That's not the goal. There is a character to each of these products that we are trying to bring some specific nutrient or some specific group of nutrients to the plant and to the soil. We're not trying to mimic nature entirely in each of these products.
The iron manganese ratio is an excellent example of what you were just talking about.
Okay, go ahead.
If we pour on more iron, we get a green up, right?
Right.
But then we stress the plant out because we just push down the bioavailability of manganese and copper in the process.
Zinc and everything else.
And zinc and everything else. Now it's overwhelmed by one element. Plants cannot live by one element. We cannot eat one thing for lunch today.
And this is why we talk to superintendents a lot about this. When we look at soil tests, iron levels tend to be so off the charts because it's a cheap and easy way to get a quick green up. And in many cases, we'll even recommend manganese sulfate to knock some of that iron off, and they still get the green up without, and trying to bring in a little, if I can steal your phrase, stoichiometry to the into the agronomic equation. But that's an important one, and that's what we're doing. That's what you're doing with these formulations, is just keeping that balance so that, I love keeping this conversation about nature, because this is really where we started. This is nature, kind of gave us the direction. She gave us the path. And we're just kind of following her. Again, yes, Protein Plus is a nitrogen product, so it's going to have a slug of nitrogen. Trilogy is going to have some phosphorus, some potassium. Cal Vantage, Mag Vantage, potassium, K Vantage are going to have their respective elements. But that's what we're trying to accomplish, and making sure, that
that we see that response.
We're getting what we want out of these products. But most importantly, that we're getting it into the plant, and the plant is utilizing it effectively. And when it brings everything in all together, it now has a completed amino acid intracellularly, and it's not susceptible to disease attack. It's that funny amino acid where everything is waiting to be put together, where pathogen can come after it. And what we're doing is, again, back to Jerry, is eliminating this funny amino acid, so the plant has a constructed amino acid intracellularly, and pathogens can't go after a constructed amino acid. And I think that's where you're seeing the results of that.
Without it being very salty, and then therefore very hydrated, again, leaving it more susceptible.
Yeah. I mean, it's all what's in the jug, and then then now we're kind of showing it's all not only what's in the jug, but how it's put together in that jug. But and you've been masterful at pulling these things together, and we've been studying these in the field for now a couple of years, and I'm always amazed and blown away by the fact, well, that really works. I mean, the one thing with K Vantage that blew me away was the water issues that people were talking about. I didn't expect that. I don't think any of us expected that to the extent that we've heard from our clients, and you've heard it more than probably anybody.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, our data indicated that there was an increase in exchangeable potassium, which is very difficult to achieve. And then you said water use efficiency was obviously different. I'm like, hooray, that's a potassium function. I was so delighted to hear that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. The other thing that we love talking about is that this is also going to help us with the rhizophagy cycle, which we're now in love with. And we've reached, well, we haven't reached out to Dr.
No,
White yet, but we
haven't.
want to. But if you're listening, Dr. White, and we know you're not, we want to get you on here and talk about that. You actually got to see his talk at Acres.
Yes.
And we talked about this in a previous podcast, but that whole idea is so fascinating to us. And I think the idea, and you can elaborate on that talk, but I think the idea of having these eco-adaptive products along with the concept of rhizophagy is really a perfect marriage, because now we're providing biological support, food support, mineral support to the population that's now bringing, that the plant is bringing in. So, but
Right.
feel free to elaborate on what you got from Dr. White.
Now that's past the foliar uptake. That's past the leaf uptake.
Yeah, that's
That
rhizo.
So something to think about. Yeah.
Rhizosphere.
Now we're into the rhizosphere.
Yeah, I think you should have Dr. White on, because he explained the reason why there are root hairs. And all along, we got it all. Human beings got it wrong all these years.
So he's talking. What Dr. White is suggesting is that the root hair is actually being generated by the exuding mycorrhizia or biology. I mean, not just the mycorrhiza.
The root hairs are doing two things. They're spitting they're spitting microbes back out in the soil system that they just got done stripping of their cell walls,
stealing all their nutrients.
Yeah, but the microbes that were pulled in originally by the root hairs are reacting to that reactive oxygen species that the plant strips their cell wall with by resisting the ROS, the reactive oxygen species, and in turn releasing beneficial nutrients or beneficial secondary metabolites to the plant, because they're just trying to survive this assault.
Assault that's happening within the plant.
Within the plant root.
Yeah.
And the plant root says, I'm done with you. I've actually gotten a lot of nitrogen out of this, by the way. Organic growers grow their own nitrogen. I don't know why the rest of the world doesn't. Anyway, you don't need it. You don't need it. and the plant now has all sorts of nutrients and secondary metabolites that the microbes produce just to survive while under being assault in this, and they spit them back out in the system. The whole cycle starts all over again. That is fabulous. You're not going to get that with salts. You're not going to get that with high inputs. You're not going to get that cycle.
So yeah, you discussed that process. That's just the process of obtaining the nutrient from the soil microbe into the plant. That stripping that happens within the plant root. All of that doesn't happen if the plant doesn't first essentially farm and colonize or encourage the colonization of a microbiome around that root.
And for each little microbe, you got to do it within 20 minutes, because that's their lifespan.
Wow. Wow. It's so awesome.
This is rapid. This is so more dynamic than we thought. We thought, the microbes are supplying organic acids. They're supplying soluble nutrients to the plant. Yeah, that isn't even half of it. The plant's also taking the microbes in. Wow.
Eating
big piece of
rhizophagy, root eat.
Yeah, you have to get Dr. White. Tell Dr. White to bring his video. He's got that in action on video.
Yeah, yeah, you were telling us about that, but that's fascinating.
Fabulous.
So the actual root here is, it's kind of like blowing a bubble with bubble gum, where you're blowing, as they're moving out of the plant, they're kind of pulling some of that and making a root hair. So the plant benefits from that as well. It's amazing that, we've been doing this as long as we have. And only in the last few years have we had this conversation, and it just blows my mind. It just shows us how much more there is for us to learn out there, and how little we really know. And it also kind of shows you, by sticking your feet in the mud and listening to some of these, these old school theories of 7 or 16, minerals needed it's just not productive. It's silliness in a lot of ways. I'm going to get into a lot of trouble for saying that. I'm sure I'll get back on my.
And why are those other elements? Why are there 75?
Why are they there? Exactly. And how come we can find them inside the plant?
Couldn't help itself. It just took them up.
It just pulled it in because.
I have a profanity response to that one, but I won't do it.
No, yeah, it's such a slap in the face to the intelligence of nature to say that,
Yes. Yeah, well, it must have been a mistake.
it must have been a mistake.
Oh, you're so
I
stupid,
figured it
Mother
out.
Nature.
I figured it out, and nature was just screwing up.
Yeah, they
Yeah, there you
just
go.
happened to be
Yeah.
there and pulled in. Yeah, you don't need all that stuff.
Mhm.
But that's again another good reason why to have, you know, these really mineral dense raw materials that we've been working with since day one. You know, kelp meal and fish meal. And
Yeah, when I work with my clients, I try to get 75 elements in their products because they are necessary for enzymatic activity. They're actually enzyme cofactors. That's their function, and that's well proven. So it's out. Yeah, that evidence is out there. I don't have to elaborate on it.
So there, Travis, you can take that to the bank. That's all I have to say. But
this was a damn good podcast.
If we have to say so ourselves. Thank you, Lawrence. Is there anything else that we can touch on? I mean, we're going to be doing eco-adaptive technology on all of our liquid formulas.
And we're going to be talking about it.
And we're going to talk about it because I think this is really one of the most exciting things in the 35 years that I've been doing this. I mean, coming out of the chute, you know, we had something that we knew was, you know, really biologically adaptable. You know, biological soil management has been our mantra from day one. But, you know, being able to take what we knew was working well and make it even better, you know, I have to thank you for all the work. And I know that our dear friend, our plant manager, has struggled with some of the changes because we're tweaking here and there, and it's not easy. I mean, what we're doing, you know, and what we're doing is really very complicated, and it's hard to manufacture, and it's never without, some kind of a fallback every once in a while. But part of what we're trying to do is really not only make a better product, but also have a better quality control, because as we get to this point where, you know, these humic substances are part of this thing, the stability is there, the infrastructure is there, and you know, and it seems like every month, every year, we're getting better and better with that, and we're just seeing more and more. I mean, we had our biggest year ever with our liquids, and I really think these are probably some of the best things that ever came out of our company. And it's so exciting. The chemistry is so exciting. The technology is so exciting. Being able to talk about it, and it's not easy. We've been spending, you know, an awful lot of time, you know, on the podcast, but more importantly, among ourselves, trying to figure out, you know, how do we even present this? Because it does sound pretty damn esoteric, you know. I mean, it sounds really out there, and it really isn't. And once you take a product like, you know, K-Vantage and start using it, especially in a sodic environment, a low CEC soil with sodium coming through the irrigation system, and you start to see the changes that a product like this can make, and it just kind of shows you that there is hope that we can, you know, get better and better, and we're going to continue to take that path at least as long as I'm here, and have some other stuff. What else can we say?
I think that we're going to keep talking about ecological stoichiometry. We're going to keep talking about eco-adaptive technology, how it applies.
You know, the one term you keep throwing at us is eco. I'm going to get it wrong. You tell me. Eco, geo, bio.
I think bio-geo.
Never mind. Don't even think about it.
But you bring the geo into it, which is the mineral fraction.
Yeah, it's bio-geochemistry that I practice. It's biology interacting with geology. These are geological interactions that we're working with. And it's that's it.
It's earth science.
Yeah. I had to study earth science to get a handle on some of these minerals. That's where the data is. The data is in geological sciences.
And the minerals was always the key thing that Jerry pushed hard on. When I was, you know, as green as could be, you know, he kept talking about the remineralization. That's why we have so much complexity in the formulas. As opposed to just building very simple, easy to make formulas. He wanted it complex because he wanted those minerals. And, you know, we now can kind of prove through data that we've got, you know, all these minerals in these formulas, both the granulars and the liquids. But this is all about remineralizing the soil, because every day the plant, you know, takes something out of the ground, it's pulling out some of the mineral, and oftentimes it's not getting replenished the way it should be. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, is constantly remineralizing that you know, rhizosphere, so that geophagy can continue with the amount of mineral that plant needs when it needs it.
And if that mineral isn't there, if it's a constructed root zone that's all sand or something like that, and we are mineralizing the root zone, but if we are also approaching the plant itself from the jug with these products, with the eco-adaptive technology, to have good proportional balance between nutrients, so that nutrient that we're applying can actually express and can actually be used.
Lawrence, you broached this, but let's just qualify this. In our industry, we kind of battle the this is a foliar spray and this is a soil spray. What you've produced is really both, right? I mean, we're getting foliar uptake, but obviously, I've always said 80% of the liquid, that's sprayed over a plant's going to roll down to the soil anyway. So, but we are getting foliar uptake. So we are going to get that very quick uptake through the leaf, but whatever is left over is going down into the soil. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, on turf, it's unavoidable. On a 7-foot tall corn plant, we can get it down.
Maybe not so much, but on a blade of grass that's a quarter of an inch high, we can.
They cut it to 0.158 inch, if I recall.
Yes, they cut it very short,
very, very
but
short.
It's been funny because we battled that that conversation. Well, I want to have foliar, and you guys are soils. Well, we're actually both. And so you're getting both out of these products because they're so nutrient dense and there's so much biological activity involved in. But not only are we getting that foliar, and foliar is quite honestly limited compared to what the soil uptake can be, but you're going to get both because you are going to spray the leaf and the leaf will draw some in, but the majority of that material goes past that, and now it's going to truly be available to the plant through the biological soil management aspect of getting these things going. So I think we've beaten this horse to a pulp.
Yes, we have.
But Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us as always. We always look forward to Monday mornings, and we all record them. And in fact, we've been passing the recent one back and forth because it's, we talk so much about eco-adaptive technology. But thank you for all your support, Jack. Thanks for hanging out in the new studio, which is kind of cool. And I want to, please ask everybody to subscribe to our podcast, because we're going to put out a lot of information that's a little heavy at times, but I think very informative. And thank you very much for joining us here on the EarthWorks podcast.